Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Protesters took to the streets of downtown San Diego today to shine light on what they call a life and death situation. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. They're demanding the Trump administration take action to fight climate change and to start by rehiring recently fired employees of the EPA. KPBS reporter John Carroll was there.
Our leaders, who are supposed to protect us, are currently rolling back eco-friendly policy, and they are firing the workers that stand in their way.
The Environmental Protection Agency was founded in 1970 by Republican President Richard Nixon. These protesters say another Republican president, Donald Trump, is trying to ruin it.
We're just fed up with what the Trump administration has been doing, attacking our communities, their climate.
Shane Petkowitz volunteers with the climate action group San Diego 350.
We're here to support, one, the EPA workers that have been fired. We're here to protest against the Trump administration's efforts to undermine climate action.
The protesters marched first to a spot outside the Edward J. Schwartz courthouse. There, retired EPA employee David Fagey urged the crowd to raise their voices in support of his former colleagues who are still on the job.
They're on the third floor on the other side of the building. They still didn't hear you. One more time.
From a place representing federal power, they marched to the seat of municipal power, San Diego City Hall, where we heard more from Fagey.
Urge this administration to put EPA back on the street, that they want clean water, they want clean air, they want climate change attended to, and they don't like what's going on.
These protesters say they won't stop until the firings of EPA employees are rolled back. Because, as they say, a lot of their signs say, there is no Planet B. John Carroll, KPBS News.
Looking at getting some wet weather in just in time for your Tuesday. So if you've got some plans, you might be shifting them. This storm system trekking in right overhead for us, which means needed rainfall. And there's a whole nother storm behind that. We'll talk about it in the forecast ahead.
Next month, South Bay voters will be casting their ballots in a special election for county supervisor. KPBS South Bay reporter Corey Suzuki says the top candidates are focused on a range of issues, including affordability, immigration, and the cross-border sewage crisis.
The election is for the District 1 seat on the San Diego County Board of Supervisors. The district represents the South Bay, which includes Chula Vista, National City, Imperial Beach, and parts of San Diego. That seat has been vacant for 2 months now. That's because in December, County Chair Nora Vargas suddenly stepped down. We still don't know exactly why she resigned. That decision has left voters in the South Bay without a county representative. It's also split the board along party lines, leaving 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. But in April, voters in the South Bay will finally get to choose a new supervisor to represent the region.
Top of mind is the sewage crisis. It's the biggest environmental and public health emergency in the nation right now.
Paloma Aguirre is the mayor of Imperial Beach. She's a Democrat and a candidate for the open seat. She says the cross-border sewage flows polluting the Tijuana River Valley should be a top priority for the county.
We know now, because of the request that I made to the Centers for Disease Control, coming down and assessing the families, that 70% of our families in South County have a family member that has become ill or have become ill themselves.
Aguirre says she wants county public health officials to look closer at how the sewage crisis is affecting students in South Bay schools. She says she would also push for the county and the city of San Diego to consider forming a joint powers authority that would focus on treating the river. Another priority for Aguirre is how expensive it is to live in San Diego County. She wants to improve wages and benefits for county staff and explore new protections for renters across the region.
I think that that's something in partnership with the rest of the board that I want to look into because, like I said, housing production is one of the multi-pronged strategy to begin addressing this housing crisis and prevent homelessness. It's not just housing production, period.
Aguirre has been critical of some recent decisions by the Board of Supervisors on immigration, including a new policy that strengthened the county's sanctuary laws. She wants the county to focus more on funding legal aid programs to help people facing deportation and other services for new immigrants and refugees.
We also need to put our money where our mouth is. So the county needs to increase the resources that nonprofits need to provide enough services, especially around legal counsel.
The county should be focused on county services. Immigration is a federal issue.
Another leading candidate is John McCann, the mayor of Chula Vista. McCann, a Republican, thinks the county should be cooperating with federal immigration authorities.
We need to be able to allow our jails, when there is a warrant, to be able to give that to the federal government. We need to be able to work collaboratively on public safety issues with our federal law enforcement, and that only makes our immigrant community safer, as well as our community as a whole safer.
McCann also wants the county to prioritize the homelessness crisis. He says the county needs to review its spending and consider building a new set of shelters.
As mayor of the city of Chula Vista, I have taken the regional lead to get homeless off the streets. In 2016, we created the homeless outreach team with nonprofits and our police department. Then we built the 65 tiny homes villages with wraparound services so people could go in and get permanent housing.
Like Aguirre, McCann also wants to address the cost of living in San Diego County. His plan is to oppose raising taxes and other fees. He's critical of the board's recent decision to explore a new sales tax to offset potential cuts to federal funding.
The county needs to go through and look at how they can become more efficient and work more effectively.
Two other leading candidates in the race, Vivian Moreno and Carolina Chavez, did not respond to interview requests by KPBS's deadline. Moreno is a San Diego City Council member and a Democrat. She represents the neighborhoods of San Isidro, Nestor, and Barrio Logan. In campaign statements, she says she wants to make housing more affordable and improve public safety. Chavez is a city council member in Chula Vista and also a Democrat. She represents the northeast quadrant of the city. In campaign statements, Chavez says she wants to focus on job creation, funding law enforcement, and expanding supportive services for unhoused people. There are also three other candidates on the ballot: Luis Fuentes, Lincoln Picard, and Elizabeth E. Ferd. They haven't raised significant funds and have a limited campaign presence. The special election will take place on April 8th. Unless one person wins more than 50% of the vote, the top two candidates will move on to a runoff election in July. Mail-in voting begins this week. Corey Suzuki, KPBS News.
KPBS recently held a community forum to hear from people who live in District 1. Coming up, what issues they hope the next supervisor will address. Teachers and staff at Grossmont Unified High School District continue to raise their voices over proposed job cuts. This morning, union members picketed outside Grossmont High School. They're opposing the school district's recent votes to cut more than 50 jobs by the end of the year to fix a budget shortfall. Critics say cutting jobs now will have long-term effects.
Because without those new teachers, when our senior teachers start to retire, we don't have anybody to replace them. And so it's key that we nurture those positions and keep them within the district. It's gonna have a huge impact on students.
The Grossmont Unified High School District Board will meet again tomorrow night. Union members say they're planning a larger demonstration before the meeting. San Diego is moving ahead with a plan to raise taxes on cannabis businesses. The City Council voted to increase the tax rate on cannabis products from 8% to 10%. It comes as the city faces a budget deficit. The move takes effect May 1st and is expected to generate nearly $4 million if gross receipts remain the same. That's not a sure thing, though, since people buying cannabis products could take their money elsewhere. All eyes are on Congress this week as we're just days away from a potential government shutdown. Michael Yoshida has the latest on the high-stakes showdown between House Republicans and Democrats.
Congress facing a Friday night deadline to fund the government. House Speaker Mike Johnson's plan, released over the weekend, avoids a shutdown, pushing the issue further down the road. It calls for funding the government through September 30th. Includes a $6 billion increase in defense spending, $13 billion in cuts to domestic spending, as well as money to support pieces of President Trump's agenda, including funds to help carry out additional ICE deportations.
There's only positive increases in spending. We're talking about our veterans' health programs, increasing military pay for our young men and women who put their lives on the line.
While Republicans say the bill makes no partisan policy changes from the stopgap bill passed in December, many Democrats are not on board.
Billions of dollars of cuts, also turning over some of this appropriations for agencies as slush funds for Elon Musk and Donald Trump to do as they will with this federal funding.
President Trump has endorsed the bill, and the House is expected to hold a vote as early as Tuesday. But with a razor-thin majority and at least one GOP rep expected to vote against the bill, House Republicans can't afford any more defections if Democrats unite in opposition.
It's going to be a tight vote. I don't think we're going to get many Democrats. I hope we do, because we don't want a government shutdown.
Over in the Senate, the math and political calculus gets even harder, where the bill can be filibustered. So even with all 53 Republicans voting in favor of the spending bill, 7 Democrats would still be needed for it to pass and avoid a shutdown. In Washington, I'm Michael Yoshida reporting.
The Trump administration's proposed federal funding cuts could impact more than 1 million San Diego residents. A county supervisor says those residents have a right to know. KPBS reporter Melissa May explains who's at risk and when the cuts could happen.
San Diego County Supervisor Tara Lawson-Remer says 1.2 million county residents rely on at least one federally funded program to meet their basic needs.
The U.S. House budget proposal includes a 15% cut to housing assistance, jeopardizing housing security for nearly 10,000 households in San Diego. Federal food assistance programs have also been targeted, with the House Budget Committee proposing 20% cuts that could leave 400,000 families in San Diego struggling to afford groceries.
Lawson-Remer says cuts to programs like SNAP, CalFresh, and CalWorks could take effect within the year.
These programs provide health care, housing, food, and jobs, and they are important not only to the livelihoods of San Diegans, but are essential to health, safety, and security.
And many San Diegans could lose their health care.
Proposed cuts to health care funding, particularly Medi-Cal, will dramatically reduce access to mental health care, substance use disorder treatment, and preventative medical services for nearly 900,000 individuals across San Diego County.
Lawson-Remer says the county must develop a clear notification strategy when services are at risk.
The notice will be distributed through multiple communication channels, including mail and email. It is crucial that all federally funded program beneficiaries be notified about impending funding cuts and potential service reductions before they occur, so they can plan accordingly.
Lawson-Remer says the Board of Supervisors will vote on the matter at their meeting Tuesday.
I will be calling upon the Chief Administration Officer to develop a notification strategy to send a notice of funding at risk to all federally funded program beneficiaries. The notice should be clear, concise, and delivered in a timely manner.
The proposed budget cuts are supported by congressional Republicans. A representative from Supervisor Jim Desmond's office says they will wait until Tuesday's meeting to comment. The CAO will be asked to report back to the county with notification strategy options within 30 days. Melissa May, KPBS News.
President Trump is not denying the possibility of a recession, saying who knows when asked if his economic policies could create one. Stock markets are reacting to the uncertainty. The S&P 500 falling again as China places new tariffs on some U.S. goods. Brian Abel has more on the retaliatory tariffs and what Trump's top economic advisor is saying.
We are seeing the beginning of what could turn into a trade war, with China's retaliatory tariffs on many U.S. farm products going into effect today. It's in response to President Trump's tariffs on China, nearly all imports from there that he raised to 20% last week. China is the largest overseas market for U.S. farm products. They are imposing tariffs on American chicken, wheat, and corn, along with soybeans, pork, beef, fruit, and others. The escalation is on top of the back and forth tariffs levied, then partially delayed on Mexico and Canada. The uncertainty impacting U.S. and global stock markets. The major U.S. indices all starting the week down after a rough last week for Wall Street. Two major indices having their worst since September. Adding to the uncertainty is the president's answer to this question Sunday, acknowledging the possibility of a recession.
Are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America.
This morning, the White House's top economic advisor, Kevin Hassett, argued that the uncertainty is actually working in the U.S.'s favor.
What I'm seeing in the jobs number, for example, is that the uncertainty is actually creating jobs in the U.S. Right now, we just saw 10,000 manufacturing jobs created in the U.S.
Now, in that interview, Hassett did acknowledge the concerns of many Americans about the economy, and there is potentially more instability ahead. First, the government could shut down by the end of the week if Congress doesn't pass a budget. And then there's Japan, with looming tariffs, sending a delegation this week here to Washington, D.C. for trade talks. At the White House, I'm Brian Abel reporting.
Well, San Diego FC remains undefeated. They beat Real Salt Lake 3-1 Saturday night. Our new digital series, Soccer a la Frontera, tells the story of soccer in San Diego and Tijuana. The latest episode is about teams that laid the foundation for what we see today. Here's KPBS reporter Jacob Ayer.
Those days, are you kidding me? I had to juggle the ball in a gas station because nobody knew what soccer was.
This is Soccer a la Frontera, and we're diving into the growth of soccer culture in San Diego and Tijuana, from the streets to the stadiums. Today, soccer is everywhere in the San Diego-Tijuana border region. We have 4 top-level professional teams, plenty of adult recreational leagues, and year-round youth programs.
I've got the Wave, I've got the new team here, San Diego FC here. That's one of them on the front, and there's the other one on the back.
But to really understand where we're at and how far we've come, we need to rewind the clock by over half a century.
When I was a kid, I was one of the kids that was screaming and yelling at the stadium and banging on the chairs.
The year was 1968, and San Diego had its first professional team. They were called the San Diego Toros, and they played at Old Balboa Stadium. It was short-lived bliss. The club folded after just one season, but the foundation was laid.
That was happening in the sport of soccer, not only during that time, but even all the way into the early 80s. I mean, teams were popping up and teams were disappearing.
It took more than a half-decade until 1976 for another professional team to make the scene. They called themselves the Jaws. Yet again, after one season, the Jaws suffered the same fate as the Toros. But the next attempt will be the one that stuck.
Here. Sitting in the same room with Pelé and Bobby Moore, Mike England, he's a Welsh, Giorgio Chinaglia, the Italian from Roma.
And this is you?
And that's me, yeah.
In 1978, the San Diego Sockers were born. And unlike their predecessors, they had a charismatic star, Julie V.
He was a veritable scoring machine.
Starting as an outdoor team, playing games at Jack Murphy Stadium, the first few years for the Sockers were rough. But a move indoors in the 80s to San Diego Sports Arena changed everything for the franchise and for professional soccer in our region.
When professional soccer went away, outdoors, the only league to play was indoor. Great level of play. It was like soccer inside, kept you in a battle.
They were a self-proclaimed blue-collar team, full of international players including V and several others who had defected from Soviet bloc countries.
And the Sockers were drawing 8,000 and 10,000, 11,000, 15,000 at some point. And so they were starting to outdraw the Padres.
With art aficionado V as their Picasso, they were full of creativity, flair, and excitement.
Now, don't forget, the early Sockers had Hugo Sanchez and Leo Cuellar, both Cuellar, the captain of the Mexican national team, and Hugo Sanchez, probably arguably still today, the greatest Mexican player of all time.
They dominated the multiple nationwide indoor soccer leagues, winning 10 league titles in 11 years.
Growing up, living in Mira Mesa, there was only the San Diego Sockers. There was nothing else.
In a town of otherwise championless sports teams, the Sockers stood out and helped to spread the culture of the sport.
The Sockers were winners, and this city was all about supporting winning teams.
and even went on to have the longest winning streak in U.S. professional soccer history, 48 consecutive wins from 2010 to 2013.
Somos el rival a vencer, es como si estuvieras jugando contra el América en la Liga MX, pero aquí de la MSL, y la verdad sí es una responsabilidad grande, pero pues es algo que al menos en lo personal a mí me gusta.
Even after all the decades, they've kept up their winning ways and laid the groundwork for a massive movement in professional soccer on both sides of the San Diego-Tijuana border.
The fan base for soccer now in San Diego is huge. It's continuously growing. You think we're at a big level now, wait for 5 more years when SDFC, imagine SDFC winning the championship, or the Wave winning the championship, and what that brings to the city.
While keeping true to their international working class origins.
Es muy diferente al soccer, hay más contacto, pues más goles, lo vives más cerca y nomás invitarlos a que nos apoyen y que nosotros vamos a estar peleando cada partido.
Up next on Soccer a la Frontera, Part 3, the rise of women's soccer in our cross-border region.
And that terrific story was produced by Jacob Ayer for the Soccer a la Frontera series. Stay tuned for the 3rd episode coming out next week. You can learn more at kpbs.org/Soccer a la Frontera.
Well, here we go. We had kind of the warm, dry period over the weekend. Now things are shifting around on us, and it brings some more wet weather. Great news, because we know how too quickly the wet season can dry out on us through the month of March, especially heading into April. So getting the moisture while we can. And we're going to keep it pretty soggy here as we head through your Tuesday as a new storm system treks right overhead. Meanwhile, your Wednesday could be at least a little showery in advance of the next one, which is really the biggest storm for our entire state, but might have some different impacts for us as we look around throughout Wednesday into Thursday. Here's what we've got moving through. Again, first up, this is kind of the weak setup before the next big storm system, but it does provide us at least some rainfall farther north in the state. We will not get in on the action. Probably about a ½ inch or so of rain possible. And it begins as we head through tonight. We'll see some of those showers pushing their way on in pretty late. San Diego 54 for the low as you work your way towards Borrego Springs, 50 degrees, and 44 in Ramona. Not really cool enough to be true snow showers out there for most locations, so there's no real issues with that. We go back into the lower 60s for the afternoon tomorrow. Oceanside 60 for your high, and Escondido coming in at 61. Notice there's plenty of wet weather and a few snowflakes trying to mix in for Mount Laguna, but I don't think there's really much in the way of accumulations. Then the next storm system comes in. This one has the far-reaching impacts, including some very heavy snowfall for the Sierra. We'll get it probably above 6,000 feet in our locations. However, as you can tell, it's really the rainmaker on Thursday that's going to provide us with that wet weather. There is some tap into kind of almost a weak atmospheric river, so it's going to provide beneficial rain as we go throughout the day Thursday, but it's not going to be truly a soaking rainfall that we can see sometimes this time of year. Temperatures falling into the 50s, by the way, for Thursday, so we are going to be a lot cooler, not only for our inland communities, but also heading into our mountain communities, which means more snow likely, again, above 6,000 feet. That's going to be your best chance to get the snowfall as we go through Thursday. The rain persists, too, in the deserts on Thursday with temperatures in the 60s. For KPBS News, I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Melissa Constanzer.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, how aid groups are coping after the U.S. cuts more than 80% of its USAID programs. That's coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Now, as we mentioned, the special election for the District 1 supervisor seat could impact the balance of power on the board. KPBS South Bay engagement producer Maria Elena Castellanos spoke with voters to learn more about what issues are at stake.
Homelessness, housing stability, the arts, and prioritizing the most vulnerable. These issues were at the forefront of a conversation with voters in District 1 this month at the Sherman Heights Community Center ahead of the upcoming special election. Sebastian Martinez lives in Chula Vista. He's the Deputy Executive Director of Community Advocates for Just and Moral Governance and has worked to help people who are experiencing homelessness.
Biggest issues for me are, number one, how the most vulnerable are going to be treated. I want to see a supervisor in that position who's not going to criminalize the unhoused. I like to see a supervisor in that position who is not going to bend to pressure to demonize immigrants.
Local artist Kim Phillips P. is the art director with Southeast Art Team, a group focused on creating public art in Southeast San Diego. She hopes the next supervisor will focus less on their personal ambitions and more on the needs of the community.
Arts and culture is very important. It's not a luxury. It is a necessity. It brings jobs to our districts. It employs artists, and so all of those are very important.
And Jonathan Burgos is the founder and executive director of First Gen Scholars, a nonprofit that supports youth, including students in South Bay schools. Burgos shared he feels District 1 constituents have historically felt unheard and underestimated.
I feel like my question to them is, what are you going to do to make sure that the voices of those who are underserved, voices from those in all regions of the district, not just are heard, but also just at the heart of it, like how much do you care about District 1 to make sure that that's at the forefront of everything that you do?
Some community leaders at the event voiced concerns about voter turnout, emphasizing that just a few votes can make a difference in a single race. The San Diego Registrar of Voters says over 370,000 ballots are already on their way to registered voters in District 1. You can learn more about the upcoming special election or submit questions you have about it on the KPBS Voter Hub. Maria Elena Castellanos, KPBS News.
We have everything you need to know about the special election online. Check out the Voter Hub at kpbs.org. You can find answers to commonly asked questions, including how do I know if I live in District 1? And take a quiz to see how the candidates align with you on important issues. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.